Hi everyone, it's Jennifer here, and I am going to show you today how to create dewy skin tones using Caran D'Ache Luminance pencils. So I'll be writing the color numbers on my little white card, and the first one we're going to begin with is 862. I'm using a really light hand and a very sharp pencil, and I'm just trying to, in the very beginning, imply where some of my shadow tones will go. And I'm using kind of a lighter version right now. And this picture is printed on Strathmore Toned Tan. So it's not going to be as obvious as if I were to use a piece of white paper. It's a little bit more subtle. But I'm starting with this tone because I really want her skin tones to look dewy and not too contrasty, not too sharp. So I'm doing more of a subtle approach here, and you'll see that I'm using a really light hand to do this as well. I'll use the 862 on her cheeks, under her nose a little bit, and along the side of her nose, just to establish where the shift in darkness will be, but I'm not drawing a stark line here. I define just the tip of her nose, her nostrils, and right underneath her eyes. I'm also adding a little bit of dimension right on her cheeks themselves, not just underneath her cheekbones, because I'm sort of establishing where I'm going to have a little bit of a glow occur. It's important to get her forehead as well. Part of it will be reflective and light, and part of it will be a little bit darker too. And around her temples. Now right underneath her lower lip there will be a shadow, so I need to indicate that there. And on the lips themselves I'm just adding a hint of color just to help me figure out where I'm going to place the actual color once I do that. Along her jawline, I'm adding some light line. And in the folds of her skin, as her body is kind of in a twisting position. And we'll see where her neck is defined a little bit by a little bit of darkness against the light. Again, this is very, very subtle right now. These are just my very first steps, and I could have gone darker with my first color, and you'll see that I will go darker too, but I just wanted to start off this way to figure out where I'm going to put things. Now, what you can see here is the dimensions where her jaw meets her actual neck, and the fact that I want to create a more three-dimensional effect there. because her face is actually standing out over her neck, so there would be a bit of a cast shadow on her neck. So if you look at the grayscale version of this drawing, this is the line art version, but if you look at the grayscale version, you will notice that I've already placed some of that information for you. But if you're using the line art version like we are today, we're going to be doing that ourselves. If you're using your grayscale version right now, you can kind of work over it. The next color I'm using is 866. Now, this is where I start to establish a little bit more of my darks. I'm comfortable enough with where I've placed that initial color, just so that I could figure out what I was going to be doing with this light. And now I'm adding some darker darks, and these will be my shadows. And my shadows in this particular drawing, I haven't drawn real dark, because again, I want her to look really subtle and dewy, almost like morning light. I'm getting into the same spots that I did previously. I'm just sharpening them a little bit. Now I'm working into her upper eyelids, below her brow bone, and into her forehead a little bit. I'm trying to establish that more reflective looking shadow. Her hair is sort of casting a shadow. Underneath her jaw, there is a direct shadow that I'm starting to make a little bit deeper at this point. There's also in the folds of her neck some areas of shadow, but they are sort of, for lack of a better word, stopped. It's not a thick shadow. It's sort of a dotted shadow, because there are areas of what we call reflected light that hit those folds on her neck. So I've left those a little bit white, you can see them. And now I'm adding a little bit more of this deep tone to her lips. I'm just slowly defining little by little. Now, all the way on the left side of her nose, I'm adding a bit more color because I want to really sharpen that. Okay, my next color is 661. This is a blue color. Now I know that that's kind of surprising, but I wanted her skin tones to be sort of cool. And I did want to get some reflection in there from maybe her surrounding environment to look more outdoorsy, natural light. And if you are at all familiar with my Secrets of Coloring series, I've done 4 different skin tones for you in that book and shown you how to use different colors to create different effects. And the cool skin tone effect is the one that I've most modeled this particular drawing after. It's not exact. I'm not using exactly the same colors. I've actually added some additional colors, but I did use a lot of the same colors that I used in that to try to create this image. However, I am doing this on toned tan paper, so it does have a slightly different effect. And I'm just kind of really lightly blending in some of these bluish cast tones into her skin. And by the end of the time I'm done drawing this, you'll see that those bluish tones have disappeared. You won't see them. They're not evident. They're not obvious. They just sort of blend in, but they somehow make her skin look more realistic. Now, where to place this blue is a little tricky. It was sort of an experiment for me, but I was thinking kind of about reflected light and around where shadows would be and what is directly next to shadows. And I do go more into that particular concept in my Secrets of Coloring books, which are books that teach you how to color and the basics of how to do that. But I'm also following the form of her face, where her cheekbones are, where her jaw juts out, where her neck, being turned and twisted in the position it is, would stand out most. Okay, now on to my next color is pink. And this pink is kind of an orangey, warmer pink. The number is 571, and I'm going to use this for her cheeks mainly, but you'll see that I do add it all around her face too in small amounts, very, very light. I'm adding some of this pink around her brow bone area to kind of make it look more reflective and stand out a little bit more and give her some color and life. And one of the things about using colors like this in skin is when you're trying to create a realistic sort of effect, you don't want to just use blacks and grays and browns for skin tones. You want to use more true color, more pure color, and add it into those other skin colors. That will help, and it'll prevent it from looking flat. A lot of times shadows, like underneath your neck, will change colors as the shadow crosses over towards the light. So pay attention to that next time you're looking at a shadow. Now a little bit to her lips. And I pull out my secret weapon, my Mon Zero Eraser, which I love, you all know. I'll have a link for it down below. This just gets a little bit out if I've gone a little too far, and this is a very, very hard thing to do without going too far because I'm trying to use such light pressure here. This drawing, this coloring has taken me so long just to do her face because I'm going so lightly and just adding a little bit at a time. And it truly is an art form. You have to have patience and you have to add lots and lots of layers to get this kind of an effect. And also pay attention to where your light would be hitting your face. That's really important in a drawing like this. Back to my 866, I'm going to start defining a little bit more, adding a little bit more depth, a little bit more darkness, but the same tones, the same warm, dark tones. I don't use too many colors in this, even though she has a multicolored face. It's surprising how few colors you actually need to create something like this. This is, I would say, a more advanced level of skin tone coloring. But if you're ready for this challenge, then go for it. And if you're not ready for this challenge and you just need something simple, try doing simple skin tone colors using your browns and your beiges and your peachy tones and pinks, and that's fine too. But once you get comfortable with that, you can move on to something like this. I do cover basic skin tones and the secrets of coloring, and I actually use some pan pastels as well, which are a beautiful, beautiful product, and they're wonderful to use for skin tones and just sort of creating larger spaces of color to fill in kind of quickly. It goes a lot faster than pencil, so that is something to look into if you're a beginner. Now I'm going over some of my blue with my shadow color here. Why? Because it's important to blend it all. We're not going to have any areas of, solid color sticking out if I'm trying to get a somewhat realistic effect here. However, in trying to get that somewhat realistic effect, I do need to add more color other than just peaches and browns and beiges. Now I'm adding a little bit more underneath the space that goes between her eye and her lips to kind of make a trail of darkness there, because right next to it is where I'm going to punch up highlights. And underneath her nose too, alongside where her nose meets her mouth. And I'm defining her chin as well. It's a slow process, but if you stop and take a look and walk away from your desk for a little bit and come back, you'll start to see it come to life. Adding a little bit more detail in her lips where the folds would be, where the shadows might actually be on her lips, where the lines of her lips might go. Okay, our next color. This is sort of a darker, more grayed out tone. I think it's 903. I'm pretty sure. Let's see if I write it down here. Oh, it's Sepia. Sepia. I need to look up this color for you. I will have it in my description. Some of the numbers and color names on the barrels of my pencils have worn off, which is disappointing and surprising to me because I don't use these pencils a ton. I actually use my Prismacolors more than I use these pencils. However, people ask me why choose the Luminance. Well, they provide such unique colors and they're not the same. You will not find the exact same matches in Prismacolor pencils as these pencils. And they're a slightly different texture, similar to Prismacolor, but a slightly different texture. They're really buttery and smooth and creamy, and I love them. But this color, Sepia, is like a grayish brown. And I'm using it so lightly just to create a little bit more dimension, but I'm going really light-handed because you'll see I'm about to make a mistake and it's just too much pencil and I have to clean it up. The other thing that you will notice that I probably shouldn't even point out to you is that there's a fleck in the paper itself on her cheek. And it drove me crazy while I was trying to do this coloring. It drove me absolutely nuts, and I kept on trying to move it, and it's embedded in the paper. But I do cover it up with some colored pencil eventually. So now what I'm doing is I'm creating a bit of a core shadow. And again, that's a concept that I cover in The Secrets of Coloring. And a core shadow is the darkest dark in your shadow area. And it sits right next to what we call reflected light. So if you can see on her forehead, there's a lighter area right next to a darker area. And that is going to start to begin to give us more depth and dimension by doing that. I can't go too dark with this pencil, and I do not have a full set of luminance pencils. I would love to have a full set of luminance pencils, and if Caran D'Ache sees this video and they would like to send me some, I'd be thrilled to have some. But they're very, very expensive pencils, although they were super high quality, and you really do get what you pay for. Really super high quality. In fact, I dropped a couple of my pencils when I was doing this coloring, and not one of the tips broke, nothing. They're so beautiful. And they're comfortable in your hand, they're the right weight. But that is one of the reasons, or a couple of the reasons, that I love them. In addition to just the unique colors that they come in. But as I was saying, because I don't have the entire collection, and because their collection is actually smaller than Prismacolor's collection, sometimes you have to make do, and I'm using a color here that is the right tone, but it's a little dark, so I have to use a lighter hand. And sometimes that's just something you need to remind yourself of, or blend a few colors together that you wouldn't normally blend together to achieve the overall look that you're looking for. Now I'm trying to define her nose here, the tip of her nose. So I'm getting a little frustrated because these pencils are soft and they have a tendency to deposit too much pigment. So in order for me to really get in and define things with a pencil that's this soft, I have to maintain a razor sharp point. And you can see my pencil is really sharp, but it's not quite sharp enough at this point to get into the area right next to her nose to really define the tip of her nose. So you will see me sharpen my pencil a couple of times to maintain that, or use my pencil and rub it on a piece of paper sideways to really kind of create a really super razor sharp edge on it. Again, underneath the tip of her nose. You can see I have not applied this pencil everywhere, all over her face. So this is what I'm talking about, rubbing the pencil on the side of a piece of paper, turning it while I'm rubbing it, so I can create a really, really sharp edge that sometimes my pencil sharpener can't even create. Now I'll be able to get into those really fine areas to establish where the dark should be meeting the light, and to really get that edge of her nose in that was really bothering me. Again, you have to be really careful when you're using a darker color on top of a lot of lighter colors, because just pushing a little too hard can deposit a little too much. And I do actually prefer the Caran D'Ache pencils to Prismacolor pencils for skin coloring, because the colors are a little bit more subtle. They They have a creaminess to them and a naturalness to them. All right, this is 872, our next color, and this is a real peachy color, and this is a color that I will spread around a lot because I'm going to basically at this point now start connecting all the different areas of her face that I've previously colored. So I'm going to get in between everything now and sort of try to make it blend so she doesn't have a patchy face. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture. It's so subtle, and with that toned tan, it's a little bit difficult to make out the subtle shifts here at this point. But if you follow along with my steps and you are listening to me speak and sort of explain what's happening to you, you will have a similar effect to what I'm trying to do here. And I apologize, I'm a little bit out of the screen here, but I'm just adding a little bit more of this peach all over her forehead because it is a connecting color. I am going over some of the areas that I previously colored with the darker colors, and over the bridge of her nose, and over her cheeks. And now I'm trying to soften the area around her eyes and blend out some of the darker color that I had added to it. Again, if you have any questions about the colors I'm using here, their full numbers and names are listed in the description below. I'm going back to 862, which is a slightly, it's sort of a mauve-y color. It's like a really, really, really light lavender that has been neutralized. It's got a lot of gray in it. It's a beautiful color. And it's a good shadow color for skin, but not a real deep shadow color. So it's a color that I would suggest using with another color like the 866 together. Those are great shadow colors together. I'm going back over the areas that I had previously used the shadow colors on, the blues, the reflected light, and I'm just coating it a little bit with this real creamy mauve color. I'm trying to connect some of those areas. Now I'm starting with another pencil. This is 832. And it's similar to the 872, except for it's a little bit warmer. It's a little bit more in the yellow family. And I'm using this sort of to tie together the last few remaining areas that I didn't touch with that last peachy 872 color. Sort of the middle section of her upper eyelids, the tip of her nose, that I start to touch that little highlight area that I'm going to establish on her cheek. And I'm using it kind of as a blender too, to smooth some of the darker shadow tones into the rest of the paper. So I have to kind of push down a little bit, just a little, to kind of get that more stark pencil that's sitting on top of the paper to push it down into the tooth of the paper. So something to consider with this particular paper, the Strathmore Toned Tan, is it is a bit of a toothy paper, which means that it has more texture to it. So this is 571, my warm pink again, my orangey pink. I'm just touching her eyelids a little bit, and in the centers of her eyelids I'm hitting them with the warmer color again, the last color that I used. And I'm going around and just sort of blending everything together with this color too, pushing it all in together, little circles, or scumbling is what we call it in artist speak, and also some directional strokes as well. I had an interesting conversation with somebody on Facebook this week about pencil techniques. Back to my 872 again. And I'm just blending everything together. Again, kind of using it almost like a blender. And I'm using these two pencils together to just go back and forth a little bit and get in the lighter areas of her skin. One is a little too yellow, one's a little too pink or peach, so I kind of combine them. And now I'm using my magical white, and you will see me use this white pencil on a lot of stuff that I do, but this is my Luminance white, and it really kind of is like, it's like magical. It's once you add this component, it just brings everything to life. You'll see how quickly everything starts to get a sheen to it. And I'm kind of blending out that white with the next lightest pencil that I just used so that it's not quite so stark. Over her eyebrows. This is the reflected light portion of her forehead. I am scrubbing it into the paper a little bit more just because I want to make it stand out enough, and I can coat it with that warmer color too, so it's not so quite so stark. I'm getting some highlights where the eye socket would be. And I'm going to run them down her cheek a little bit towards her mouth. And this is what gives this true dimension. You can already see it coming to life with just the addition of this white. Now, we are covering skin tones in this particular video, but if you are interested in seeing how I've colored her hair and how I've finished off her eyes then those will be separate videos for you to watch as well. They may be special videos, so stay tuned. Now I'm getting around her nose a little bit. I like to add that little flash of white around her nostril. That really helps to create this glow that I'm trying to achieve. And right next to the darkest part of the shadow by her eye, I'm adding on the bridge of her nose along both sides, I'm adding some more of these highlights that are kind of strong. And on her brow bone. These are all areas that protrude, and it's where the forms actually change shape. It's where they change form. So those are areas that pick up light because they stand out, or they cave in, or they meet another point, and it changes the dynamic of the light right at that point. So that's what helps to make this look realistic. That's what helps to make this look dimensional. I'm just hitting these subtle little areas above her lip line. And now I'm creating that moment I've been waiting for with this really, really beautiful, glowy highlight that runs all the way along her cheek, from her lip to her cheek, and it really helps to define that form there. And you can see I'm scrubbing in circles a little bit, but I'm also using directional line. It's sort of a combination. And I'm trying to have the angles of my highlights sort of match across her face. And again, in the centers of her brow bone, where her brow bone runs down to her upper eyelid. And along the side of her face, I'm adding a little glow. Just a subtle amount on her jawline, just to pick up some of that reflection, the reflected light. The face is made of so many different planes, and all these planes connect to one another, and everyone's face is unique. Every face is different. So sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, but yet at the same time we are all somehow alike, and there are some simple rules that we can follow to establish the structure of a face every time and time again. Those things will work to help us create that illusion. But it's the little subtleties and the nuances that make all of our faces so unique. And you know, when I draw, one of the things that I pay very close attention to is the proportions of the face that I draw, because I'm fascinated by proportions and how these subtle shifts can make a person look so incredibly different. So you do sort of pick up on that once you start doing more drawing, once you start doing more coloring of portraiture. And here I've used my white just to, the 872 together to kind of, starting with the white and then covering it with the 872 to kind of run alongside that shadow, and just to add some more actual peachy skin tones. And I like to use the white underneath a lot of the time because it just sort of boosts that color that I put on top of the white. But you can see that her neck is starting to now look a little bit less like paper and more like skin. Okay, a new color for you, and this one is a really light color, so I will outline the color so you can see it. But this is 242. And this is a real pale yet neutral yellowy color. And again, this pencil got dirty, and I don't want to contaminate my drawing. I don't want to mess it up, because you can really mess up a drawing by using a dirty pencil. So I actually just cleaned it off. I rolled it all along there. And I'm just connecting some of those areas again where the white meets the other colors, sort of in between. It just makes it look more finished and less broken up. So we won't have so many independent shapes. We'll have more of a cohesive overall skin tone in the end. All right, back to my 862 just for some subtle refinement. I apologize, I'm out of the frame a little bit here, but you'll see in just a moment how I'm using this. Again, you'll notice it's a back and forth of using these colors over and over again, doing slight adjustments, adding a little bit more here and there, and until I've built up this strong color that looks like skin. So again, I'm using this mauvey color, neutral mauvey color, to kind of fill in some of the shadow areas. And I'm getting that little fleck out right now. That's what I was just doing, that fleck that was driving me nuts. Oh, I couldn't stand it. Last few touches with this white, I'm just going over some of these areas again just to add another layer of the white. It's so important to remember that you need to add multiple layers of things, and sometimes it's one color, then layered with another color, and then back to the original color until you get that creamy consistency that blends all together and looks unified over the whole portrait. A couple little touches of the real pale yellowish color right up against that mauve-y color. They're playing off one another because the mauve color actually has some violet in it, and the yellow color is, if you look at a color wheel, is the exact opposite of violet. So they do play off each other really beautifully. Back to my 571, my orangey pink. And I'm also using my white, but it needs to be sharpened a bit because I have to do some detail work. Back to my sepia. I'm jumping around a little bit here. I'm trying to decide what to focus on next because I know I have to work back and forth. So I added some of the dark in there to really establish the shadow of where her lips cover over her teeth, and you will see a shadow kind of, you know, on her teeth, a subtle shadow on her teeth. We won't see really details of her teeth. And I'm using this pink to really liven up her lips now. I did use the mauve color in the beginning and some of the other shadow 866 color to create the shapes of what I needed. Now I'm worrying about the color. So I'm adding some more of these pinkish tones to liven it up a little bit. And then the last bit on her lips is to add some of the highlights and the reflections. And there are some areas like towards the inside of your mouth, like the inside most part of your lips will sometimes get a real saturated color. And I don't like to have a real strong line around the lips themselves because it sort of flattens out the lips, so I do sort of break up that line a little bit. I'm just getting some more of the color in there, little by little, not overdoing it. Sometimes it's just a couple of strokes. I'm just adding a little bit more definition with the darks and the lights and the color, and I'll be done with this. So I hope that you enjoyed watching me color this fairy today. This is my Staghorn Nymph, and she's available in my Etsy shop in both grayscale and line art. And if you'd like to see more, what else would you like to see? Well, leave me a comment below. And again, I do have some more videos actually working on the completion of this that I have in the works, but they may only be available to certain viewers. I'll let you know more about it as we get a little bit closer to the time that I release them. But I hope that this has been helpful, and I look forward to reading your comments, and thank you for watching. Have a good one.